비탈릭이 나온다고 하네요. 제가 모르고 앉았는데 사람들이 공부 안 하는 애들이라 원래 이 컨퍼런스 룸에 사람이 없는데 갑자기 많아졌어요. 왜 그런가 했더니 비탈릭 때문이었습니다. 그래서 좋은 기회로 찍어보도록 하겠습니다, 여러분.
Cool. Let's directly jump into the discussion. So one of the first DevCon was in 2018. So well, it's been a few years, 7 years. And back then we already had a similar panel, and we were asking the question, okay, what was on the two of you? And I'm not sure who not Robin, but not a named person. I need to look it up who the first person was. But yeah, so we were already asking back then the question, what would success would look like, and also what could go wrong. So kind of what are the potential positive outcomes, and also how would they be measured? And maybe that's my first question into the round is, if all the things we are trying to build go right, what measurement or what societal KPI would change, and in what way? And then of course we can connect it to, as that already happened, so maybe directly starting with that one is Joe.
Sure. Metrics that would indicate that we've succeeded would be applications being used, lots of applications used by consumers and businesses, truly decentralized applications. We've got a giant internet and a giant Web 2 out there. A lot of Web 2 is pretty exploitative, and so Ethereum is now scalable horizontally and vertically. It's quite usable. It's going to get very usable with AI in the interfaces. It's affordable, and in most of the world, it's now legal to use tokens, to issue tokens, to participate in DeFi, and it's going to get increasingly legal. It's going to get legal to build applications and operation that some regulator is going to come after you. And so I think the broadband moment is here, and we're going to be able to move Web 2 applications to their replacements.
Sold the rights to the Ethereum name to Sam Altman for $999, and then the project just shut down. Then, by that standard, would Ethereum be extremely successful today, right? And obviously, if you define, right, exactly. If you define the metric too naively, then there would have been totally lots of Ethereum users, and we'd be talking about like Ethereum for militaries or like whatever it is the AI people talk about, right? And obviously, of course, this is we do have specific outcomes in mind, and so I'll propose one. Let's take averaging over all of the different pairs of countries. How long does it take for the just either any person, or potentially we could even say like a politically disfavored person, to send a transaction from one country to another country? What delays do they incur? What percent of that transaction do they lose? Like basically measure to what extent we've reduced global the inequities of global finance. And arguably, you could even say there have been some successes, at least if you take a sort of post hoc or go prop or hoc bias, and you look at look at what PayPal fees were like in 2013, and look at what both crypto and non-crypto is like now. And then do a similar thing across other categories of application. So I don't think that would cover everything, but that's
me give you 3 metrics. The internal one is investment relative to customer revenue. For a long time, we've had a lot more investment in customer revenue. That has to change to become a stable industry, so we hope.
Right. Which is that, when basically investments were encouraged to do something that looks on the surface like caring about the long term, but actually that's very hard in practice. And so they cared about proxies, which were basically impressing the next fool who also thinks they care about the long term. And now we're in a very different environment. So and this is one of the hypotheses that I see people talking about, which might force more near-term focus on its own.
I think the discussion is related to some question. We were jokingly discussing at some point whether Ethereum is more like a tech startup or more like a religion or ideology. So it seems that that kind of to some extent economic rules are different in crypto. I guess. Of course, there's Bitcoin as
So I'm an economist, economics professor, and our standard textbooks make these nice distinctions. Well, there's for-profit firms, and then there's non-profit charities or clubs, and crypto just doesn't fit those categories very well, which is striking. There was this remarkable synergy of capitalism, greed, idealism, and aspirations that has made this work. And if we can finally make it pay off, it'll be a triumph of that sort of thing in the future, I guess. But it throws out the usual categories. People often don't think you can combine greedy, even rapacious capitalism with idealism and producing grand new things that achieve community ideals, not necessarily personal ideals.
So if Ethereum was a tech startup, it would have failed. We talked to VCs early on, and we decided to go in a more decentralized direction. Ethereum was a vision and value.
The risk exists. I think this is definitely one of those situations where I think part of it just is that we have to invent the solution as we go, and because Ethereum is a very unique type of structure and ecosystem, and a very unique mix of goals and incentives that are aligned in some cases and not aligned in some cases. I think, in terms of we can list strategies for trying to solve things. If we define the problem as being standardization, but that's only one of the ways of thinking about it. Basically, the way that I usually enumerate the strategies are basically, one is, of course, virtue signaling, which is basically, you have a culture where, going along with some either standards or principles is valorized, and this is something that gives you better standing in a community. I think every community everywhere relies on a non-zero extent of that, but it's also very possible to over-index on it. Then 2 is some organizations, which could be the Ethereum Foundation, or potentially it could be other groups. You could even have 2 sectors basically doing this against each other. What the tech world calls commoditize the complement. Basically, something like the Ethereum Foundation could write the software that makes the right way of doing things closer to zero cost because the software already exists. Then a third option is just transparency, right? So to the extent that people agree, at least abstractly, that something is the right goal, then make it more transparent, and what strategies and what projects are actually doing what things toward that. And right now the Ethereum ecosystem has used some mix of all 3. I actually think that the second strategy that I mentioned is probably one of the more undervalued ones. And so, within the foundation, we've been exploring the idea of doing more in that regard. Actually, building more software packages that could be build like that actually touch things at the user layer or like somewhat closer to the user layer that reduce the development effort of like following some standards, potentially following along with some like shared security goals or other kinds of goals. But I don't think it has a single solution.
So every time I buy a new toothbrush, it has a different charging mechanism.
So I made a point of
EU trying to solve that.
yeah, that was interesting because I did make a point of like finding the few toothbrushes that charge with USB-C, and it definitely is tricky. Well, the thing that probably made it more easier recently is, AI has made it easier because it's like basically like adds a more powerful search engine, right? And I could say like, tell me the USB-C compatible versions of a thing, and like you could do this before with search, but the AI-based tools make it one step easier. So arguably, you could say that this is a form of transparency.
So I think there is a chance that Ethereum is replaced as the world computer, the decentralized infrastructure on which nation states and major corporations and other sub-ecosystems are built. But I think the chances of anything displacing Ethereum at this point are minuscule. There's nothing out there that could replace Ethereum. Everything out there other than Bitcoin and Ethereum looks kind of like a company. Bitcoin and Ethereum are the only two credibly neutral and decentralized platforms out there. So I would argue that roll-up-centric roadmap makes a ton of sense. We've been in this divergent phase. We're now in a convergent phase where we are going to figure out how to make everything synchronously composable or near synchronously composable. And anyway, people are going to be building applications with SDKs and wallets and with AI agents speaking to different blockchains. And so people are just going to be using applications, and some of the backends will be on different networks. I would argue that a year from now, it's going to be very clear. So many institutions are coming to us and wanting to build on Ethereum, to build on layer 2s or build on layer 1. A lot of that's about stablecoins and real world assets, but the applications are going to be coming. So a year from now, I think it's going to be very clear that there are going to be some cool layer 1s and some cool layer 2s and some layer 3s. But really, Ethereum is going to be the major decentralized protocol substrate. It's going to be, Ether is going to be seen as a trust commodity, and from that it'll get its monetary premium.
So one way to frame the question is, what's the consumer demand for the credibly neutral, decentralized part of these products? Because other people can offer similar products that lack those features, and plausibly they're more nimble, they can more organize marketing campaigns, maybe they have cheaper technology. But there's the fear that they could displace because most customers don't actually care that much about the decentralized, credibly neutral part until there's a big crisis, perhaps, which would then make the big lesson for everyone. So then 3 different scenarios. One is no big crisis, and then people just drift to the other thing and they lose the key thing you treasure. Another scenario is there's a crisis of some sort whereby everybody sees the virtue of decentralized credibly neutral.
More basically since the beginning, right? And there was Augur at the beginning, and then even outside of Ethereum, Truthcoin and Paul Stortz's work, and then since then Polymarket and like.
Wait, there was another project.
Right, Moment. Yeah. Indeed. Moment is great. So I guess I'm curious, compared to your expectations of this space back then, like how do you feel about the impact that prediction markets have made since, I guess, the idea and our attempts to make it happen have started?
So the audience might not know that there was a burst of interest in prediction markets in the aughts, and that many companies explored and tried, and many firms were pursuing it, and then that interest faded, and there was a period of disinterest and low activity, and then
Faded
crypto.
because of the CFTC or the
It
interest
faded because of just lack of business interest, that is. I mean, there were some things CFTC messed with, but basically most executives are shy about implementing prediction markets. So it hadn't been implemented well enough, not enough marketing, whatever, but like product failed temporarily. And then crypto people started thinking as the sort of
Complaining
thing.
about users not using our technology.
Right? No, it's the issue, right?
Yes, that is.
Can you make something users want? Yes. But then crypto people saw this as one of the key applications that they could imagine selling through a decentralized digital platform. And so that was part of the initial appeal for many early crypto projects, platforms. And then they took a long time to actually get much user revenue traction, but that's okay for crypto apparently. That's all right to have a long lead in, but then in the last few years we've got this burst of the poly market, and that's great to see, and that will certainly lower costs because the more you pay for an infrastructure, the more you can make lower cost other things. And so I'm of course most excited that these lowering costs will allow us to expand into other markets. That is, we've had betting markets for a long time at a modest cost, and lowering the cost of betting markets.
Projects doing wrappers of like passports and government ID, and we have WorldCoin, and like those two are both becoming quite successful. WorldCoin is over 10 million users, but there are definitely elements of centralization in at least the consequences of I think designs that have like singular identities, and to me, circles can be a powerful way of just experimenting with even using the money aspects to help battle test a form of identity where the issuance mechanism is more decentralized and more like social graph driven. And I think this is like a third corner of the identity triangle that really deserves to be properly explored.
Product only for Polygon. I mean, we want to build a product for anybody that can use it in the space. So spinning off this makes a lot of sense, because we can start being in the space of the provers, competing, open source memory. Instead of dividing that by the clock in the execution time, we can divide by memory address. So we can take all the operations in one range or in one state machine, another operations of another range is another state machine, and the state between ranges is also added and subtracted to the loss. I mean, it's not a time division, but it's an address division. But the idea is very much the same as using the bus for this internal